He was already free, already sailing away, the worst behind him. All he had to do was stay quiet and let the wind carry him home. Instead, he turned around and shouted his own name into the dark, and that one decision is the reason a 2-week voyage turned into a 20-year nightmare. This is the story of the cleverest man in the ancient world, and how his own pride became the thing that hunted him the whole way back. The journey began right after a 10-year siege finally broke, not through force, but through a trick. A massive wooden horse, packed with hidden soldiers, left as a gift at the gates of a city that had held out for a decade. The trick worked in a single night. The mastermind behind it, a king named Odysseus, should have been home with his wife and son within weeks. It took him 20 years. The unraveling started small. A raid on a coastal town went fine, until his men ignored his order to leave and partied on the beach overnight. By morning, reinforcements arrived, and dozens of his men never made it back to the ships. Then a storm blew the fleet off course for over a week, landing them on an island where the local fruit erased memory entirely. A few of his scouts tried it, and had to be dragged back to the ships, weeping for lives they could no longer remember. The real turning point came on the next island. Odysseus led a small party into a cave stocked with food. His men wanted to grab it and leave. He insisted on waiting to meet whoever lived there. Curiosity that nearly cost them everything. The cave belonged to a one-eyed giant, a son of the sea god, who sealed the entrance with a boulder no group of men could have moved, and then ate 2 of his crew for breakfast, 2 mornings in a row. Killing the giant wasn't an option. Only he had the strength to move that boulder. So Odysseus got him drunk instead, and when the giant asked his name, Odysseus told him it was nobody. Once the giant collapsed, they blinded him with a sharpened, fire-hardened stake. His screams brought his neighbors running, but when they asked who was hurting him, he answered nobody, so they shrugged and left. The next morning, Odysseus and his men strapped themselves beneath the giant's sheep and slipped out under his own hands. That should have been the end of it. But as the ship pulled away, Odysseus stood up and shouted his real name back at the giant he'd just blinded, pride that demanded credit even when silence would have cost him nothing. The giant called out to his father, the god of the sea, and asked that Odysseus never make it home, or if he did, that he arrive broken, alone, to a household in ruins. Every word of it was granted. What followed reads like a punishment built specifically for his flaws. A king of the winds sealed every dangerous storm into a bag and gave him a gentle breeze to sail straight home. 9 days in, with his own island in sight, Odysseus finally rested and fell asleep. His crew, curious for over a week about what was in that bag, opened it the moment his eyes closed. Every trapped storm exploded out and hurled the fleet back across the sea they'd just crossed. Worse came next. A harbor of giants destroyed 11 of his 12 ships from the cliffs above, taking hundreds of men in minutes. Only his own ship, anchored outside the harbor, survived. 12 ships had become one. They washed up on an island ruled by a sorceress, whose spell turned a scouting party into pigs. Odysseus, protected by a charm from a passing god, went in alone, broke her magic, and got his men back, only for the whole crew to stay a full year at her invitation while his wife waited at home, not knowing if he was alive. Before he could finally leave, he had to sail to the edge of the world and consult a dead prophet who gave him one warning: never touch the sun god's sacred cattle. There, he also met the spirit of his own mother, who had died of grief waiting for him. He tried 3 times to hold her. She slipped through his arms each time. The most fatal stretch of the journey came next. He passed the sirens, ears of his crew sealed with wax, while he alone stayed lashed to the mast, close enough to hear their song without being able to steer toward it. Then came an impossible choice between a 6-headed monster and a ship-swallowing whirlpool. No safe path through either. He chose the option that cost 6 men instead of the whole crew, and heard every one of their voices as they were taken. Then, trapped by bad winds and starving, his crew broke his one rule and slaughtered the sun god's cattle while he slept. Days later, a single bolt from the sky split the ship apart. Every man was lost except Odysseus, who clung to the wreckage alone. He drifted to an island where a goddess offered him eternal life if he'd simply stay forever. He refused, and spent 7 years staring at a horizon he couldn't reach before she was finally forced to release him, without even a proper ship. He built a raft, sailed for over 2 weeks, watched it get smashed apart by a sea god who still hadn't forgiven him, and finally washed up on a shore where a foreign king gave him passage home. 20 years after he left, Odysseus woke on his own island's beach to find over 100 men occupying his household, eating his food, and pressuring his wife to remarry. She'd held them off for years with a quiet stall, weaving a burial cloth by day, unraveling it by night, until a servant gave the secret away. Disguised as a beggar, he walked into his own home unrecognized by everyone, except an old dog he'd raised as a puppy 2 decades earlier, who lifted his head one last time, wagged his tail once, and died. Inside, he was mocked and pelted with scraps while he watched, counted, and waited. When his wife announced a contest, string his old bow and shoot an arrow through a row of axe heads, not one suitor could even bend it. The beggar took his turn, strung it easily, and fired clean through every axe. Then he turned the bow on the men who'd taken over his home, and the reckoning 2 decades of loss had been building toward finally arrived. Even then, his wife wasn't fully convinced. 20 years changes a person. So she ordered their marriage bed moved from their room, and Odysseus immediately said it couldn't be. He'd built it himself around a living olive tree still rooted in the ground. Only the real Odysseus could have known that. That was the detail that finally broke through. 20 years, 1 war, a god's personal grudge, monsters, sorceresses, and a house full of enemies, and it all came down to a man remembering how he built his own bed. Nearly 3,000 years later, the lesson hasn't changed. The smartest person in the room can still ruin everything if he can't resist the urge to be recognized for it. Sometimes the smartest move anyone can make is the one where they say nothing at all.